All right, everybody, let's jump into the Futato exercises from lesson 13. The assignment that you were given here starts with section C, and I know this is set up like a usual, translation exercise, but what we've actually got here is a focus on agreement between adjectives and the construct chain. So I'm not going to work through this the same way that I would for a translation exercise because the methodology, you're only translating phrases here rather than complete sentences. But what I will do is I'll look at some of the things that you need to be paying attention to. So here, you'll note these first two sentences are exactly the same except the adjective in number one is singular, ha tova, that is feminine singular. Number two, it's feminine plural, ha tovot. So this changes what's being modified here. In the first one, you have, in both of these, you have shanat as feminine singular construct and ha milchamot as feminine plural absolute. So when ha tova is singular, it's modifying the singular noun, shanat. So this would be the good year of the battles. But when ha tovot is plural, it has to be modifying the plural noun, ha milchamot. And so here you get the year of the good battles. Right? So the adjective has to agree with the noun that it's modifying. All right, number 3 and number 4 are again very similar. B'nei ha-melech in both of these. And then number 3 has ha-gadol, and number 4 has ha-gedolim. So number 3, ha-gadol is masculine singular. Number 4, ha-gedolim is masculine plural. And what that indicates here is that in number 3, ha-gadol modifies the singular noun, ha-melech, the sons of the great king. But in number 4, ha-gedolim, being plural, modifies the plural noun, b'nei. So we have the great sons of the king. Number 5 and number 6 are again very similar. Mishpachat, ha-nevi'im. And then number 5, the adjective is ha-chachama. Number 6, the adjective is ha-chachamim. And so ha-chachama is feminine singular, so it's going to modify the singular noun, mishpachat. The wise family of the prophets. But in number 6, ha-chachamim is going to modify the plural noun, ha-nevi'im, and so you get the family of the wise prophets. All right? So again, the adjective has to agree with its noun. Number 7, we have Eved ha'aim hechazach. Eved ha'aim hechazach. All right, and so number 8, we have, number 8 is a totally different one altogether. So we're no longer comparing between two similar sentences. Eved is going to be, again, these seglet nouns look the same whether they are in absolute or construct state, but here we know it's construct because we've got the makef connecting it to ha'aim. And so since the definiteness of the construct depends on the definiteness of the absolute, we can see here that we have the servant of the mother, the strong. And so we have to ask, what does the strong modify? Is it the strong servant or the strong mother? Well, mother is feminine. It doesn't look feminine. It doesn't have the comet ending, but we know from our vocabulary that it is feminine. And Eved is going to be masculine. So ha-chazak, being masculine, has to modify Eved. So this would be the strong servant of the mother. And then number 8, we've got Sefer ha-kohen ha-kadosh. So Sefer, this is going to be, again, construct. It is a seglet, so it looks identical to its absolute state, but it's got the makef here connecting to ha-kohen, so that's how we know it is a construct. All right. Let's see here. Sorry, I just got an email update about a library request, so I wanted to make sure I knew what was going on. All right. So Sefer being construct, we have the book, since the definiteness of the construct depends on the definiteness of its absolute, the book or the scroll of the priest, the holy. So is it the holy book or the holy priest? Well, in this case, both Sefer and ha-kohen are masculine singular. So ha-kadosh, which is also masculine singular, could be modifying either noun. So that's why Futato notes here the context will clarify, because it could be either one. So the answer here would be either, and I would recommend in these cases putting both answers, the holy book of the priest, or the holy scroll of the priest, or the book or the scroll of the holy priest. Number 9, we have Zahav Ha'ir Ha-Tahor. Here's Zahav. If you've got a sharp eye, you'll recognize that this is in construct, because Zahav usually has kamets. I think 2 kamets, one under the zayin, one under the hey. And so here you can see that it's been reduced because the accent is no longer on the hey, the accent gets shifted to the next word. So we have an open pro-pretonic syllable over here, which requires a shava, or a reduced vowel. And then we have a closed, unaccented syllable, which requires a short vowel. And so we have Zahav, gold of. Gold of the city, since the absolute is definite, so is the construct, the gold of the city. Ha-Tahor. This would be pure, the pure. So is it the pure gold of the city, or is it the gold of the pure city? Well, already you can kind of tell that the gold of the pure city, or the gold of the clean city, makes less sense than the pure gold. We would use pure with respect to gold more often than we would use it with respect to city. So that's a little bit of a hint right there. I know that both of these look masculine singular because they don't have endings, but remember, ear, and even its plural, arim, those are both actually feminine, even though they don't look feminine. So if tahor were modifying ear, it would have to be tahora. And I think it would actually be tehora. We would reduce to a shava here. So in that case, ha-tahor has to modify zahav. So we have the pure gold of the city. And then number 10, we have divrei, torat Adonai, ha-tovim. Divrei is going to be the masculine plural construct form of davar. So this is words of. Torat, this is going to be the feminine singular construct form of Torah. Words of the instruction of the words of the instruction of Yahweh, or Adonai. Now, if you're asking, well, why do you insert the? Because there's no definite article either on Divrei, on Torat, or on Yahweh, Adonai. Adonai doesn't need a definite article to be definite because it is a personal name, and personal names are a type of proper noun. And all proper nouns are by default definite. They don't need a definite article. So since the absolute noun is definite, all of the construct nouns are definite. The words of the instruction of Adonai, or Yahweh, the good ones. So what does hatovim modify? Well, it's masculine plural, so it has to modify a masculine plural noun. Adonai is masculine singular, Torat is feminine singular, but divrei is masculine plural. So we have the good words of the instruction of the Lord. All right, let's take a look here at C, then D, then G. All right, so let's take a look at D. All right, I see that Jesse has joined. Jesse, if at any time you have a question or anything, feel free to interrupt me. I've got you on my second screen, so I won't always see you if you type like into the chat or anything like that. But if I do see you, I'll respond. But always feel free to interrupt. Are you able to hear me? I don't know if you can respond or if you can type at all, but okay, perfect. All right, so I'll keep going unless there is anything you want to discuss. But like I said, interrupt me at any time. All right, so we'll look at section D here. This is now looking at the word kol, and kol, you'll note, has the kaf holum lamed, but you are not usually going to see kol with the holum because kol tends to be in construct most of the time. And so you'll see the construct form of kol, which is not kaf holum lamed, but kaf kametz chatuf, which is what we have over here. I know this looks like a kametz, they look identical. But this is actually a kametz chatuf because kol is a closed syllable, and when it's in construct, it gives up its accent. And so when you have a closed unaccented syllable, you need a short vowel, and so that's why this is kametz chatuf rather than kametz. All right, so looking at this, we're going to try to translate through here. Now, this is really important to understand when you use certain English phrases to translate kol, because you need to reflect in your translation whether the absolute is plural and whether the absolute is definite. And I'll show you, well, Futato here will show you how you can do that. So in number 1, we have kol ha derachim. So we have kol, and then we have a definite plural noun, the roads. In that case, when you have kol plus definite and plural, you would use all for kol. When kol has a plural absolute, that's when we use all. All in English is a plural adjective. It's not a singular adjective. We wouldn't say something like all man has let me think before I just give an example here. All man will die. Like, we wouldn't say that. We might say all men will die, but all is plural, and so it modifies plural nouns. We would say every man will die. So every or each man will die. Each and every are the singular adjective. All is the plural adjective. That's very important to realize in English. Now, we know how to use all in English. We use it properly, but we don't stop and think about the fact that all is a plural adjective rather than a singular adjective. And so in your translations, you need to reflect that. So we can use all here for kol because the absolute is plural. All of the roads. But we'll also see some nuances on there. All right, so number 2, we have kol plus a definite singular. So here we're going to use each or every, but because this is definite, there's actually a little bit of a trick here. There's 2 ways to translate something like this. Now, I said up here that all is when your absolute is plural, but technically we could also say all of the road. The reason why we could say that is because all of the road doesn't refer to the road, all refers to all parts of the road. This is what we call a partitive genitive. And so what we've got here is either all of the road, so that basically means the whole road. So those are the 2 ways that we can translate this. I recommend just going with the whole rather than all of. All of may be easier to get to in like a literal word for word translation type way because, you're in construct. And so you tend to put the word of in there anyways. But that's going to cause you problems when you add all to a word that's in the singular, just in keeping everything organized in your head. So I'll let you choose how to translate this. Technically, you could translate number 2 here as all of the road or the whole road. So you could say the whole road was covered in leaves, or you could say all of the road was covered in leaves. Those both make sense. The whole road, I think, sounds better, and I think it will be easier if you can attach the whole to kol plus singular definite as sort of like a rule. I think that will be easier to keep in your head. But think through your English translations here because you want to be careful not to misuse all, each, and every. All right, so what about number 3? Kol derech. This is singular and indefinite. So in this case, we wouldn't say the whole or all of the road. In this case, we would say every road or each road. That's the difference here. So when your absolute is definite and plural, you would say all of the roads. When your absolute is definite and singular, you would say the whole road. And when your absolute is indefinite and singular, that's when you would use each or every. So number 4, we've got definite singular. So this is again where we would say the whole altar. Number 5, we've got definite and plural. So we would say all of the gods. And then number 6, we have indefinite and singular. So we're going to say each or every. Each house or every house. All right. So again, how you translate kol varies quite a bit depending on what its absolute is. So that's just something to keep track of in your head. All right. And then the next part here of the assignment was activity G. All right. So we'll work through these. I'll go through these, each of these, trying to implement that translation methodology that I've talked about before. So again, we've got a Hebrew sentence here. I'm going to anticipate, but not require, that the first word is my verb, just because that tends to be the case in Hebrew. Hebrew sentences tend to start with the verbal element. It is by no means required that it start with the verbal element. maybe only 60% of the time will it start with the verbal element. So 40% of the time you'll have something else. But if you approach a strange-looking word expecting it to be a verb, it will help you parse it. Natan is not that scary. That's pretty straightforward. That is the lexical form of a verb that we already know. But if we were to look at yid rashu, well, that's a little scarier looking, and it helps us calm down to think, hey, it's just a verb. Let's just parse it up. Let's take the pieces off that we don't need. So that's why I start with that strategy. Step one is expect the first word to be a verb. It won't always be a verb for sure, but if you start with that expectation, it'll be easier to parse. All right. So number one, we start with natan. And I'm actually going to, so we'll just put this right here so that we're not cheating by looking at the answers. All right, so number one, we start with natan. Natan is a straightforward CalPerfect 3MS form. It means he gave. All right, so we have he gave. What we do not want to do in Hebrew is just translate this word for word and say, he gave a prophet of Yahweh the law to the people. And the reason why is because that doesn't make sense. Sometimes you can make sense of it. If you took off la'am, you could say, he gave a prophet of Yahweh the instruction. And that would make sense in English, but it would be wrong. It would not be a proper translation of Hebrew. Don't just translate through here word for word. He gave a prophet, and then, oh boy, I got to click in here. He gave a prophet. This is construct, so it would actually be the prophet of Yahweh. But in Hebrew, we put the verbs at the beginning usually, and then the subject after. So do not translate this as he gave the prophet of Yahweh the instruction, because in English, that means that he is the subject and the prophet of Yahweh is the indirect object. That is not what's happening in Hebrew. The prophet of Yahweh is not the indirect object. The prophet of Yahweh is the subject. So we're just going to take out he and replace it with the prophet of Yahweh. The prophet of Yahweh gave what? Et tells us what? Gave the instruction to the people. This is to the people because that kametz there indicates that we had a hey, definite article, hey kametz, definite article. It's hey kametz instead of hey patak because the ayin can't take the dagesh, and so the patak lengthens here. But we get the prophet of Yahweh, again, the definite prophet because the absolute is definite. Even though Yahweh doesn't have a definite article, it's a personal name, and so that's definite by default. The prophet gave the instruction to the people. All right, number two, again, we get this yid rashu. This is really tricky because it doesn't look like anything we've seen before. But if we expect it to be a verb, we can ask, how many letters does a Hebrew verbal root have? 3. How many letters do we have here? Well, in counting the vowel letter, Shurik, we have 5. So what's extra? Does Shurik ever get added as a suffix? All the time. All right, so Shurik is probably not part of our root. What about the shin? Is shin ever added as part of a suffix? No, not really. So shin is probably part of the root, which means resh is probably part of the root, which means dalet is probably part of the root. And so our root would be darash. Now we will have certain verbs that we'll get to next semester where you do get what we call infixes. These are not prefixes or suffixes, but they're particles that get added to the inside of a word. So that doesn't mean that once you find a root letter, the 2 next to it are also part of the root. You can't always depend on that. But at this point, we've not learned about any infixes, especially resh or dalet getting put into the middle of a word. So once we get to shen, resh and dalet are pretty reliably going to be part of the root. That would mean that both shurik and yod are added. So when do we add shurik to the end of a verbal root? Well, we do it in the CalPerfect in the 3CP form, and we do it in the CalImperfect in the 3MP and the 2MP forms. Of those 3 options, only one has a yod prefix. The CalPerfect 3CP has no prefix. The CalImperfect 2MP has a tav prefix, and so only the CalImperfect 3MP has a yod prefix. So this is going to be a CalImperfect 3MP form of darash. Darash means he sought or he inquired, and so yid rashu would mean they, masculine plural, will seek or will inquire. They will seek or they will inquire what? They will seek Sefer ha-berit. So Sefer is book. You know that it's in construct, book of the covenant. Since the absolute is definite, the construct is also definite. we could tell that from the et here. This marks a definite direct object. So they will seek the book of the covenant. What else do we have here? Bebeit Adonai. So bebeit would be the beit preposition plus the construct form of the noun bayit. Bayit means house. And so bebeit or beveit here would be in house. There is no definite article here, but that's because it's in construct and it can't take a definite article. However, it's absolute, Adonai, as we discussed before, this is definite. So it would be in the house of the Lord, even though there is no definite article here, because Adonai is definite, and so the construct is definite. So we get, they will seek the book of the covenant in the house of the Lord. Now, Futato often translates beit as temple, which is perfectly fine in this situation, because the house of the Lord and the house of any, god or false god or whatever would be a temple. But beit doesn't just always mean temple. If it's the house of the Father, it's not necessarily the temple of the Father. All right, number 3, we've got halahu. All right, so again, I'm going to expect that this is a verb. How many letters does a Hebrew verbal root have? 3. How many do I have? I have 4. So what's extra? Does hey ever get added as a prefix? It actually does. We haven't seen it yet, but there will be times when that happens. So it's possible that hey is added to the word, but far more common, and especially since we haven't learned it yet, hey being added, far more common is the idea that Shurik is added. All right, so if we take off the Shurik, we're left with hey lamed kaf. Now, we don't just assume that hey lamed kaf is our root, because frankly, if hey gets added, which we'll learn about later on, maybe hey is not part of the root, in which case we'd only have true root letters. And we will learn about verbs in the future that lose a root letter. It actually disappears. Actually, I think that we just started learning about that with the one noons and the third hays. They actually lose a root letter. So you won't see the root letter for the third hay in the cal imperfect or for the one noon in the cal imperfect. You won't see that root letter in the root once you take everything off. So what we have to ask at this point is, if we take off the Shurik and we're left with hey lamed kaf, is hey lamed kaf a root that we're familiar with? Is it a root that we've learned? Now, certainly, once you get out of Hebrew class and you're reading in your Hebrew Bible, there are going to be Hebrew roots that you haven't learned yet. So the appropriate question then is not, is this a verbal root, hey lamed kaf? Is hey lamed kaf a verbal root that I've learned? Because just because you haven't learned it doesn't mean it's not a verbal root. The appropriate question should actually be, is hey lamed kaf a Hebrew verbal root in the lexicon? At which point you would go look up hey lamed kaf in your lexicon, and then you would find out what it means. And if what it means makes sense in the context, then you've probably got the root. But you have to be careful, because a lot of times there are, given a particular conjugation, there might be a few different roots that are possible. And you need to consider each of them so that you don't limit your translation to what you assume the root is. You want to make sure that you have an open mind and you consider all the possible roots. Again, that's a lot of information. That's pretty early. We're pretty early right now to be thinking that way, because right now all the verbs that we're going to get in the exercises here are going to be verbs that we've learned. But I just want to prepare you for, once you get through, Hebrew classes and you get into your Hebrew text, there's going to be a lot of roots that you haven't learned yet that you need to be open to, so that you don't artificially limit what your translation can be. All right, so that said, is hey lamed kaf a root that we have learned? Yes, we have learned the root halach means he went or he walked. And so here, when we add a Shurik to that, that is the CalPerfect 3CP form, which means they walked or they went. All right, so my next word now, especially when I've got a third person verb, I'm going to anticipate, but not demand. I'm going to anticipate that this is my subject, because that's the word order in Hebrew most often is verb then subject. I won't always have an explicit subject apart from the verb, but I need to be ready for one. So, halahu, they went, or they walked. Anshe is the masculine plural construct form of anashim, so men. So the men of the city, because again, we're in construct here. The Sarah Yod indicates construct, plural, masculine. And so it is men of the city. Since the absolute is definite, men will also be definite. Excuse me. And so we get the men of the city walked. But then we have ha-chazachim. All right, so kazach here is going to be the word for strong, or strong will probably be best in this context. So we have to figure out what ha-chazakim is modifying. So we're going to look at all of the nouns in this sentence and try to figure out which one best matches ha-chazakim. So ha-chazakim is masculine plural. In this sentence, we have anshe, which is masculine plural. We have ha'ir, which is, I know it looks masculine singular, but remember, ir is feminine singular. We've got milchama, which is feminine singular. And those are the only three nouns that we have. So the only noun that matches the masculine plural of ha-chazakim is going to be anshe. So that is the noun that's being modified. So we now have the strong men of the city went. Lamed preposition is to. Milchama. To battle. Milchama is battle. But, yes, this is not in construct. This is the absolute form. The construct form of milchama would have a shavah under this chet. And it would also have a kametz tav, or a patak tav here. So went to a battle, a great one. And just to confirm, we need to make sure that it sounds good to say that gadol modifies milchama here, but let's just be sure. We need to make sure that they match in gender and number. So gedolah is kametz hey, so that's feminine singular. Milchama is feminine singular, so we have a match there. What is the relationship? What is the function of this adjective with milchama? Is it attributive or is it predicative? Well, the couple ways is, first of all, it comes after the noun it modifies, so generally that means it's attributive. But another way to confirm that is to check and see whether the definiteness of the adjective matches the definiteness of its noun. And here in both cases, they both lack the article, so they agree also in definiteness, which would confirm that they are attributive. So we get the strong men of the city went to a great battle. All right, number 4, we've got nishlach. And let me just read through the sentence here. Nishlach kesef v'zahav el b'nei ha'av ha'tovim. So nishlach, I'm going to expect this to be a verb. How many letters does a Hebrew verbal root have? 3. How many do I have? I have 4. So what's extra? Does chet ever get added as a suffix? Not that we've seen. What about noon? Is noon ever added as a prefix? Yes. In the cal imperfect, 1CP, we get a noon here prefix. And that's what we have here. So this is almost certainly cal imperfect 1CP, as indicated by the noon here prefix. If shalach means he sent, then nishlach would mean we will send. All right? Then I would ordinarily expect my next word to be the subject, but here I've got a first-person verb. And for a first-person verb, really the only subject that you can have is anachnu, we. So this probably is not my subject. We will send kesef vezahav. We will send silver and gold. So that indicates that silver and gold are a compound direct object. Now, if this is the direct object, then why don't we have et here? The reason why we don't have et is because et is what marks a definite direct object. And here, kesef vezahav, silver and gold, these words are not definite, so you wouldn't have the definite direct object. We're not saying that we're going to send any specific silver or gold. We're just saying we're going to send some silver and gold. So that's why it's indefinite. We're not saying this gold or my gold or your gold. We will send silver and gold, some of it. Okay, that's why there's no definite article, and that's why it's not a definite direct object. We will send silver and gold. Where will we send it? Preposition L tells us where. To b'nei ha'av. So b'nei here is the masculine plural construct form of bain. So son, this becomes sons of the father. To sons of the father. Since the father is definite, b'nei is also definite. To the sons of the father, the good ones. All right, so what does hatovim modify? Well, it has to modify a masculine plural noun. If we look at all the nouns in this sentence, there's only one that's masculine plural. Kesef is singular, zahav is singular, ha'av is singular, but b'nei is masculine plural. So we will send silver and gold to the good sons of the Father. All right, number 5. Now again, here's where we see a little bit of variety. I'm expecting or I'm anticipating that my first word is my verb, but I'm not demanding it, okay? So I get to ha'aim. Now, I know, because I know my vocabulary, that ha'aim is not a verb. This is the definite article on the noun aim or mother. So that can't be a verb. So let's see what we're dealing with. Let's read a little bit more and see what we can find here. The mother, the habat. So habat is the definite article on the noun daughter. The mother and the daughter, yashavu. Okay, so here we've got our verb, yashavu. Now, how do I know this is a verb? Practice, experience. I don't know what else. If you don't recognize it immediately as a verb, then the fact that you can't really figure out what to make of it would be an indication that it's probably a highly conjugated word. So the root is, in here, but it's a little disguised because it doesn't look the way that you're used to seeing it. But if you get to a word and you're not really sure what to make of it, ask yourself, might this be a verb that's conjugated, and can I unconjugate it? So that's what we'll do here. If this is a verb, how many letters does a Hebrew verbal root have? 3. How many do we have? We have 4. So what's extra? Does Shurik ever get added as a suffix? All the time, okay? What about yod? Does that ever get added as a prefix? Quite frequently. In the Cal imperfect third person, the yod gets added as a prefix. The problem is, if this yod is a prefix for a Cal imperfect third person, which would be third person plural because of the Shurik, there are 2 problems that we run into if that's what we've got here. One, we've only got 2 root letters. So if the yod is a prefix and the Shurik is a prefix, then we've lost a root letter somehow, and we have to figure out where that went. Since we haven't learned about verbs that lose a root letter yet, I'll just tell you out the gate, that's not what's going on here. Secondly, if yod is a prefix, the conjugation we've learned so far that has yod as a prefix is the Cal imperfect. When we have a Cal imperfect, so far, we've learned that the prefix letter is a Hirik, or the prefix vowel is a Hirik, and this is not a Hirik. So that's not making a whole lot of sense. It is making sense that the Shurik is a suffix, but what if the yod isn't a prefix? What if it's just part of the root? That would give us our 3 root letters. Can we make sense of that? Well, if we take off the Shurik and we take yod, shin, beit as our root, is that a root that we're familiar with? Or is that an actual Hebrew root that we could look up in the lexicon? And it is. We've learned the root yashav means he settled, or not, I guess not he settled, but he dwelt, or he sat down, or it could just mean he lived. In that case, the Shurik would indicate a Cal perfect 3CP, and we can see that yashav in its lexical form would be kametz patach, but we've lost the patach here. It has reduced in order to make room for the new syllable that the Shurik adds. And so all of this makes sense if this is a Cal perfect 3CP. So what we have here is the mother and the daughter, they sat or they dwelt. Tachat here is a preposition. It means under, underneath, under. Under what? Ha shemayim. So they dwelt under the heavens, or they lived under the sky, maybe. They sat down under the sky, which is a little bit weird, but let's double check our translation to make sure it makes sense. So the mother and the daughter either sat down or dwelt under the sky or under the heavens. Yeah, they sat under the sky. So it's kind of a weird sentence. I guess it just means they're outside, but whatever. Good enough. All right, number 6. Now, again, I anticipate the first word to be a verb, but I recognize lo immediately. I know this is not a verb. This is a negative particle. It means no or not, but it is attached to, or not attached to, but it is placed next to a verb. So the verb does come first. It's just got a negator on it. All right, so let's look at this verb. How many letters is a Hebrew verbal root supposed to have? 3. How many do I have? I have 5. So what's extra here? Well, Shurik is frequently added as a suffix. That gets rid of 1 letter, and I've got 4. What else can I get rid of? Can I get rid of the chet? Is chet ever added as part of a suffix? No, we haven't learned that. So what about the tav? Is that prefixing? And if so, we would have a tav prefix with a Shurik suffix, and we would have the 3 root letters, zavach. Well, zavach is a root that we know, and we also know of a conjugation that adds a tav Hirik prefix and a Shurik suffix. That conjugation is the Cal imperfect, and that happens to occur in the 2MP form, the second masculine plural form. So what we have here is a Cal imperfect 2MP form of zavach. Zavach means he slaughtered or he sacrificed. So tis v'hu is going to mean you all, masculine plural, will slaughter or will sacrifice, but it's negated. So we would translate this as you all will not slaughter or sacrifice. Slaughter or sacrifice what? Zivche Adonai. We've got a masculine plural construct, so we've got a construct chain here. You will not slaughter or sacrifice the sacrifices of Yahweh, or Yahweh's sacrifices. Again, I say these sacrifices because our absolute, Yahweh, is definite. You will not slaughter Yahweh's sacrifices, clean ones. This is a little weird because I think this should be definite. I'm not sure why it's not definite. It does come after the noun, so that is an indication that it's attributive. This can't be predicative. And I don't know if maybe in the composition of the sentence he wanted it to agree in definiteness, and since Zavach does not have the definite article, he didn't give it to Tehorim. But Zavach is definite, so Tehorim should also be definite, should also have the article. We saw this above where Hatovim has the article, even though B'nai does not. So I think this is actually a typo. I think this is an error. I think this should have the article on it. And so you will not slaughter Yahweh's clean sacrifices. You will not slaughter the clean sacrifices of the Lord. Al, so this is a preposition, upon. Where will you not sacrifice them or slaughter them? You will not slaughter them upon Mizbeach Tameh, upon an unclean altar. All right? Now he translates Zavach here as offer. Zavach does not mean offer in the same, it like offer someone a drink or offer someone a deal. Zavach only means offer in the sacrificial sense. So it's only because in English we use the word offer to mean like an offering or a sacrifice that you can translate this as offer. This would not be a literal translation. That does not make it a bad translation. It works in this context because offer in the context of sacrifices does fit with what Zavach is doing. But if you wanted it to be literal, it would be something, and again, literal is the wrong word, but if you wanted it to be, I don't know, whatever we tend to mean by literal, then slaughter would probably be a more one-for-one, a closer English translation than offer. All right, but the meaning is accurate. You will not offer clean sacrifice. You will not offer the Lord's clean sacrifices upon. And it's really a weird sentence because you would expect this to be something like you will not offer clean sacrifices to the Lord rather than the Lord's clean sacrifices. But either way, we made it through. That's one problem with, authors of grammar, textbooks kind of creating sentences is we tend to reverse engineer them rather than, because we're not actually learning how to speak biblical Hebrew, we're learning how to translate it and read it. So when we have to compose it, we tend to start with what we would say in English and then sort of reverse engineer it into Hebrew in a very literalistic way, where Hebrew probably wouldn't speak that way. That seems to be a little bit of what's going on here. Now, I could be wrong. Futato knows Hebrew way better than I do. That's fine. But there are things about this translation that if I didn't have his answer here, I'd wonder, what is going on? So just a heads up if you ever wonder that. All right, number 7, we've got B'mikom Kodesh Amadta Lifnei HaElohim. So B'mikom Kadesh. Makom here is construct. It would usually have a kametz here, but it also has the makef just to make it clear. So this is be, the bait preposition. The reason why we have a hirik is because we would have a shavah, but Hebrew doesn't like 2 shavahs at the very beginning of a word, 2 shavahs in a row at the very beginning of a word. So the first one drops a dot and becomes bim. Bimkom kodesh, or kodesh. Bimkom, it's hard to say, the B and the M and the M. Bimkom kodesh is in or at a place of holiness. In or at a place, a location of holiness, amadta. Now, if you don't recognize amadta here, then maybe it's a verb. And if it's a verb, we'll go through our process. Now, hopefully the tav kametz ending is jumping out at you, but let's just ask our questions. How many letters does a Hebrew verbal root have? 3. How many how many do we have here? We have 4. So what's extra? Ayin never really gets added as a prefix. So what about the end? Does tav ever get added as a suffix, specifically tav kametz? Yes. In the CalPerfect 2MS form, we add tav kametz to the end of our root. Amad means he stood. Amadta means you, masculine singular, stood. So, at a holy place or at a holy location or in a holy place, you stood, lifnei, before, ha Elohim, before God or before the gods. So the word order is really unusual, or it's not regular. We usually have the verb and then the subject if there is one. There's not an explicit subject here. And then we would have where you stood and then the additional preposition before the Lord. But here we get part of the where you stood first, then we get the verb, then we get the rest of the sentence. And so it's possible that the person who's writing this is emphasizing the location where you stood. You stood before God in a holy place. Like that's the important part of the sentence. And so it gets fronted. Fronting is what we call this when we move a phrase or a word to the front or in front of where we would normally expect it. That's called fronting. And one of the reasons to front part of a sentence would be to emphasize it. All right. And then finally, we've got tov, shame, tov, mekesef, rav. All right, so what in the world is going on here? Tov means good. Shame means name. Tov, again, means good. Mekesef, this is the preposition min, next to kesef, which means from silver. Rav. Rav is the adjective much or many. And Rav is masculine singular, so it has to modify a masculine singular noun. Tov is masculine singular, so Tov has to modify a masculine noun, masculine singular noun. So what are we going to do here? Well, let's just follow the word order to start with and then see if we can clean it up. So here we have good name, good from silver much. That's pretty rough. What can we do with this? Well, we don't have any verbs here. So this is what we call a verbless clause in Hebrew. In Hebrew, when we have a verbless clause, the verb element, or what we call the predicate, tends to come first, and then the subject tends to come after the predicate. And so if we've got tov shame, wow, see again, I probably would have composed the sentence differently if I were writing it, but again, Futato knows his Hebrew better than I do. Tov shame would be good name or a good name, good from much silver. Remember in Hebrew, when we have an adjective followed by min plus a noun, that is Hebrew's convention. That is Hebrew's way of comparing two things, drawing a comparison. We call this the comparative min. So the way we talk about comparisons in English is we add er to the adjective, and then we use the word than. So here the adjective would be good, so we would say gooder than silver, much. But of course, gooder isn't a word in English. We would say better than silver, much, or many. And that doesn't make sense, so we would just play with it a little bit and say better than much silver or money. And then we can see how our verbless clause is a good name is better than much silver or much money. That's basically how you get to this. But there's a lot of feeling out that you have to do in that one. You can tell that this is sort of proverbial in nature, and proverbial statements tend to not follow the same rules of word order and all of that. So that's why it gets a little bit trickier to translate. But you do know all of the words here. If I were composing this, I probably would have said tov mekesef rav, tov shame. Because I would have put the predicate first. But again, I don't know Hebrew as well as Futato does, so he probably has a reason for that. All right, so that is 13. We've got -2 minutes to cover 14, and I'm sharing my office around, quotation marks around office, because it's really our spare bedroom. I'm sharing that with my wife, who's not yet in a meeting, but she will be shortly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hurry through the rest of these. Let me take a look at the assignment here. 14, B, E, F, and G. All right, so let's look at these real quick. 14, B, parsing. I'm just going to point out sort of the clues to how to quickly recognize what's going on here. All right. So number one, this looks just like you would expect, except for the fact that you're used to seeing the Kometz Patak pattern in a CalPerfect 3MS, and here you've got Kometz. Why does it change? Well, I hope Futato explained this in the chapter. The third aleph. What happens with aleph is it's a weak letter. We've got 4 weak letters. Well, I'm sorry. Take that back. I take it back. It's a guttural. We have more than 4 weak letters. It's a guttural. We have 4 gutturals. But aleph is the weakest of the gutturals. It is so weak that when it closes a syllable, like you see here, it can't actually close it. It's not strong enough. And this actually becomes like a shadow of an aleph rather than the actual aleph. So what that means is this syllable isn't actually closed. And since it's not closed, it's open and it's accented, it wants a long vowel. And so that's why the patak bulks up into a kometz, because the aleph can't actually close the syllable. All right, but other than that, this is your standard CalPerfect 3MS. It's just in these third alephs, you're not going to get the patak because it can't close that syllable, so you get the kometz there. All right, number 2, first thing you should notice here is the tem on the end. That tem tells you right away that this is CalPerfect 2MP. Now, there is a little bit of irregularity here because instead of just a shavah, which is what you'd expect under the ayin, you get the hatef patak here. And the hatef patak is here because these gutturals don't like shavahs. That doesn't mean they can never take them, but they avoid them if they can. And since the ayin has a preference for A-class vowels, it takes the hatef patak. All right, but other than that, it's exactly what you'd expect. Number 3. What you should pay attention to here is the noon prefix, all right? Because dalet never gets added as a suffix. You've got 4 letters, so one's extra. That's the noon. The noon prefix automatically tells you that this is Cal imperfect 1 CP. What's unusual is the vowel here. You usually have a noon heric. But again, the 1 gutturals, especially the one ayin, like that A-class vowel, they have a strong preference for A-class vowels. And so that's why you get the patak here under the noon. And again, the same as above, this would normally be just a shavah, but because it's a guttural, because it's an ayin, it wants a hatef patak. Number 2, again, 4 letters, one's extra. We don't add ayins to the end of verbs, but we do add tavs to the beginning. And a tav here at prefix is what we expect to find in the Cal imperfect 3FS or 2MS. This could be either one. So it's either she will find or you masculine singular will find. Number 5. This is a big one. Lots of letters going on here, but again, the tem suffix should jump out at you. You'll notice in this tem suffix that you don't have the dagesh that you have up here. Again, the reason for that is the aleph. You only have the dagesh here because the resh closes this syllable, and the begad kafat letter is preceded by a consonantal sound. That's what gives it the dagesh lene here. But when you have the aleph here, you don't close, and so it's preceded by a vowel sound, which is why you lack the weak dagesh here. Okay, and that's also why you don't have a shavah under the aleph, because it's not actually there. It's like a silhouette or a shadow of an aleph. It can't hold its own letter. It's an open syllable here, and so there's no need for the shavah. All right. Excuse me. Number 6, we've got Ya'avdu. Yeah, I think that's right. Ya'avdu. All right. So is it right though? I don't think it's right. I think it's Ya'avdu. I think that this is a vocal shavah. Now, this breaks one of those rules about having short before the shavah means it's silent. But the trick here is Futato isn't showing you that this is actually accented right here. I think. If I'm wrong and the accent is here, then this is just Ya'avdu. But I would need to go and look. So either way, it doesn't matter for parsing. You don't care where this is accented. What you need to know is it's got a Shurik and it's got a Yod prefix. Now you might be thinking to yourself, hold up, I've got a Yod patak instead of a Yod heric. What in the world's going on? Well, what in the world's going on is you've got it next to an ayin that wants an A-class vowel. This is going to get tricky later on when we learn about a different pattern that does put patak as the prefix vowel. There's another pattern, it's called the hifil, and in the hifil you will see a patak under the Yod. And that usually will indicate that you've got a hifil pattern. But there's something else that happens with the hifil that is missing here. And so that's why we know it's cal. We can explain this patak. Why is the patak there instead of a hirik? Because the ayin prefers a patak. All right, fair enough. All of it makes sense. That means this is a cal imperfect 3MP. Number 7, we've got ga'alu, or I'm sorry, ga'alah. And so here, there's actually a couple possibilities because Allah, I think, is a verbal root, but so is ga'al. So how do we choose between them? Well, we can add comets hey to the end of a root easily. For example, the cal perfect 3fs, but we never add gimel to the beginning of a root. So it's not Allah. This is ga'al, which means he redeemed, but it is in the 3fs of the cal perfect, which means she redeemed. And then number 8 here, we've got amar tem. Again, that tem suffix should jump out at you right away. You know this is cal perfect 2MP. The only irregularity here, again, as we had up in avar tem, is instead of a shavah under R1, we get this hatef patak. But again, that's because the one gutturals don't like shavahs. So it's easily explained. All right, that is section B. Let's take a look at E, and then F and G. So let's look at E here. All right, more parsing. Yizbach. Yizbach here, we've got a pretty obvious yod-hirik prefix on zavach. So this is cal imperfect 3ms. Number 2, we've got shalahu. It's a pretty obvious Shurik suffix on shalach. So this is a cal perfect 3CP. We know it's perfect because there's no prefix. Number 3, we've got nasanu. Actually, I think it's nasanu. And this one gets a little bit tricky because there's a lot of possibilities here for your verbal root. It's obviously not anu, that's not the root. But what about sa'an? That is a possible root. Now, we haven't learned that one. But then again, we also have nasa, which is a root that we've learned. So clearly we're going to prefer nasa as the root, since we've learned that one. And we can explain the new suffix as cal perfect 1CP. So this would be, if nasa is he lifted up, nasanu would be we lifted up. Let's see here. Yeah, the only other irregularity is we would usually have a patak here with the accent mark on the sen, or with the accent on the sen. But the reason why this is a kametz instead of a patak is because that aleph can't close the syllable. It's an open syllable, and so it wants a long vowel here. Number 4, we've got ya'avdu, or ya'avadu. Again, I think that's the same form we just saw, isn't it? It's the same form. Come on, Futato. Reusing your parsings? What are you doing? So we're not even going to deal with that. We already did. Cal imperfect 3MP. Number 5, we've got helachtem. All right, now this is a little bit tricky if you're at the end of first year, because there are certain times when a verb in Hebrew will have a hey hatef patak prefix, in which case you would take that off of the root. But that's not what we have here. What we have here is a tem suffix, leaving halach as our root. And the explanation for why we've got a hatef patak here instead of just a shavah is because, again, the hey is a guttural. Gutturals don't like shavahs, so it gets a hatef patak. So this is a cal perfect 2MP. Number 6, malachta, pretty obvious ta suffix on malach, which means he reigned or he ruled as king. Ta means you, masculine singular, reigned or ruled. Cal perfect 2MS. Number 7, we've got nishpot. All right, so nishpot, we've got 4 letters. What's extra? Does tet ever get added as a suffix? No. Does noon ever get added as a prefix? Yes. Noon hirik prefix occurs in the cal imperfect 1CP. So we take that off, we get shafot, or shapot, and that's from shafat. Shafat means he judged, so nishpot would be we will judge. Cal imperfect 1CP. Number 8, we've got mode. All right. So aleph is a pretty obvious prefix here. Aleph segel is the prefix that we expect in a cal imperfect 1CS. If our root then is amad, amad means he stood. So amod would be I will stand. Cal imperfect 1CS. Number 9, we've got timtsa, pretty obvious tav hirik prefix here. Matzah is he searched for, or he looked for, or he found. And so timtsa, it's kind of hard to say, timtsa would be either cal imperfect 3FS, she will look for, or she will find, or count imperfect 2ms, you masculine singular, will find. Number 10, we've got tiktolna, and that's right out of our paradigm. Tiktolna could be two possibilities. It's either count imperfect 3fp or count imperfect 2fp. They have the same form. Tav heric prefix, nun comets he suffix. All right, so that's E. Looking at F, we'll just do one of these translations. We'll do the longest one here, which I think is number 5. So again, we've got a verb here. How many letters is the root supposed to have? 3? We have 5, so what's extra? Oh, it's the same word. He did it again. 3 times this word appears. You guys better know this word by the end of this lesson because it's all over the place. So again, Ahmad is the root. Oh my goodness, it's up here too. It's like a scavenger hunt or something. Oh, that's not a scavenger hunt, but there's something crazy going on here. Wait a minute, I'm wrong. This was Ahmad. That's the one we had. This is Avad. Okay, Avad is the one that we had. All right, so down here, number 4 is cool. Ahmad, that's a different verbal root. But number 5, Avad, that's the one we've already had. So Avad again, he stood. We've got a yod prefix. It's not yod heric, it's yod patak, but the reason for that is because the ayin here prefers the A class. So we've got yod prefix, shurik suffix, that is 3MP in the Cal imperfect. So they will stand. Ame. Who will stand? Ame. Am is people. This is a masculine plural construct. The people of the land will stand. No, Avad, not Ahmad. Avad is, I think, perish, or Avad, flee, something like that. What is he? Oh, I'm thinking of the Aleph. Perish. Yeah, okay. So this is tricky. With the Aleph, it means perish. With the ayin, it means serve. And I guess the way to remember that, get back down here. The way to remember that is that it's related to the noun eved. Eved means servant. So they will serve. The subject is the people of the land. The people of the land will serve. Serve whom or serve what? Et ha Elohim. So we'll serve God or the gods. Bekol makom. In every location, in every place. So the people of the land will serve the gods in every location. All right, and then we'll just pick one of these here from G. Let's do, I'll tell you what, Jesse, do you have a preference here between Ezekiel 44, 1 Samuel 28, and Genesis 1:1? Don't pick Genesis 1:1, it's too easy. All right, there we go, now he's typing. All right, Samuel it is, let's go. Okay, so I'm going to click on 1 Samuel 28:20, and then I'm going to open up my Hebrew text. I do it over here because the electronic version of Futato really screws this up. So 28:20. All right, so let's just go. This is a big sentence. It's probably more than one sentence, but we're going to go through it. Okay, so because I'm doing the full sentence, we're going to see stuff that we haven't seen before. That's okay. We're going to work through it though, and we'll end here. All right, so first thing, I've told you before that we kind of start with the expectation, especially in historical narrative, that the first word is a verb. Now you'll notice something here. And it doesn't show up as well in this one because the yod doesn't have a dagesh, and there's a reason for that. But you've got this vav, patak, and you would normally have, so here, vav, patak, dagesh. Let's keep going. Vav, patak, dagesh. Vav, patak, dagesh. You'll notice this pattern, vav, patak, dagesh, starts a lot of these verses. This is a feature in Hebrew that we'll learn about next semester. It goes by, there's different people use different names for it. It's often referred to as the vav consecutive or the vav relative, whatever. But what it is it's a device that Hebrew uses for carrying narrative forward. It's almost like saying, and then, and then, and then, okay? And the form it takes is a vav with a patach, and then a dagesh in the next letter. Now that doesn't happen here with the yod, because yod is one of these weird letters. Whenever you have a dagesh in a yod, and that yod has a shavah, the dagesh tends to drop out for whatever reason. So, anyways, don't need to know a whole lot about that, but that's what we have here is this Hebrew narrative prefix, and it's on maher. Now, maher, this would be from the verbal root mahar, which you haven't had yet. Mahar, I'm looking down at the bottom, it means to make haste or to go fast, I guess. It's in a pattern called the PL, which we'll learn about next semester. All right, so it's basically he went fast or he made haste. Who made haste? Shaul. That's Saul. Saul made haste, and Yapol, this is another PL. No, this is a cow. This is the one noons that we're actually learning about this week. So this assignment's from last week, but this is a one noon that we're learning about this week. And this would be from Nafal. So Vayipol means he fell down. All right, so Nafal means to fall down. This is Saul ran or made haste, and he fell down. Melo komato. So Malo here, this is going to be a particular form of the root that we've learned as Malay. And it's actually not a form of that, I guess. They're calling this a noun that comes from that root. And they're saying this is fullness. This reminds me of, I think it's in the Psalms, a verse that says, this is from Isaiah 6. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The earth is full of his glory. Malo appears there as well. They're saying that this is not a verbal conjugation. This is a noun that means fullness. So he fell down, fullness of komato. So kom, this is a root that we haven't had yet. Oh no, this is from koma, which means height. The fullness of his height, artsa, toward the earth. So eretz is earth, and then this kamatse ending that gets added here, this is directional. So he fell down, the fullness of his height toward the earth. So his whole body fell toward the earth. And this is from Ra'ah, he saw. Vayir ah, and he saw Ma'od mid bere Shemuel. So he saw very much, he saw exceedingly from, oh no, this is not Ra'ah. This is going to be Yareh. Yareh means he was afraid. And he greatly feared. He was greatly afraid. This, I think, is a min of source. So this would be, or of cause maybe. So he was greatly afraid of, or he had great fear from the words of Samuel. Also, koach. Koach is strength, I think. Power. And power not there was with him. So, and there was also no power with him because lo achal, so he was out of strength, basically. There was no strength with him. He was out of strength because lo achal, because he did not eat lechem, he did not eat bread, kol hayom, all day long, basically. And kol ha lila, because he had not eaten bread all day or all night. Whew. All right, that's quite a... So Saul ran quickly and fell, the fullness of his height toward the earth, and he was greatly afraid because of the words of Samuel. And also he had no strength with him, in him,